first thing we need to do today is establish what we mean by talents. You've already figured it out from the gospel lesson, I think. In our modern day usage, a talent refers to an innate gift, such as composing music or being an astrophysicist, or perhaps athletic, creative, or artistic aptitude. But back in Jesus' time, a talent was a large sum of money. Some sources say about $1,000 translated to our currency today. Using that as our guide, the first slave received 5 talents, or $5,000. He somehow traded with that sum and made 5,000 more to make 10,000. The second slave was given 2 talents, or $2,000. He doubled that, making 4,000. Now, we're not told how exactly the 2 slaves managed to double their money. It's entirely possible that they did it through unscrupulous business dealings. The master, of course, didn't care how the slaves got the money, and we notice that he didn't share a portion of it with them. The third slave was given 1 talent, and he did the safe thing, perhaps the more honest thing. He buried it. And we further see that this slave accused the master of being dishonest. So, for not making more money and for challenging the master's business practices, he was punished severely. So, talking about this parable could go in a couple of ways. One might say dishonesty pays. The first 2 slaves were praised and put in charge of many things, despite their possible shady dealings. Or we could focus on the third slave and see that honesty doesn't pay. Or we could see how risk might play a part in one's life. In a way, the third slave might have been the smart one. He wasn't willing to risk. When one gave money to the bankers, one could win, lose, or break even, much like the stock market today. Some companies are doing quite well and are safe to invest in, at least right now. Others have been trading with little gain or loss, not much risk there. Still others are on a precipice and could go belly up at any time. The third slave chose to play it safe. My take on this parable is that being willing to take some risk is the way to go, but do it honestly. Risking means different things to different people. A safe risk might be to say, play $5 on the New Hampshire lottery. If you win $500 and play that, you're not really playing with your own money. It's kind of like playing with someone else's money. So if you lose, you've really only lost the original $5. And I think I read that it goes to a New Hampshire education fund. So someone does win. 3 years ago at a fundraiser, I beat a young man in his 20s at a silent auction. We were betting against each other for the dubious opportunity to jump from a plane at 10,500 feet. On the appointed day, I signed the stack of papers that said I understood all the things that could possibly happen to me, including death. Some friends came to watch, joining my husband, and get this, his ex-wife. I admit, the jump was exhilarating, but I don't need to do it again. That truly was a risk. We've done whitewater rafting a couple of times and a hot air balloon ride, and that completes my need to risk. My husband is thankful that, though I keep my motorcycle license, My old knees make it impossible for me to hold up a big bike now. But those risks are foolhardy, and some might say immature. A few weeks ago, I participated at the confirmation of about 40 folks, most of them teenagers, in Massachusetts. As a basis for his sermon, the bishop used the hymn, "I Sing a Song of the Saints of God." It's one of my favorites. You remember that the text speaks of the many saints, past, present, and future, known for making their mark in the world in a positive way. His focus was on the line, one was a soldier and one was a priest, and one was slain by a fierce wild beast. And there's not any reason, no, not the least, why I shouldn't be one too. He had us turn to page 19 and following in the prayer book, which has the calendar of saints and their dates of death. The first was Saint Martin, who was a soldier in the Roman army, but later became a soldier of Christ. First a monk and then a bishop, he was known for his love for others and his life of sacrifice, caring for the less fortunate. Truly a model for the teens and adults alike in the congregation that day. Next, the bishop spoke of the exemplary life of a priest, Thomas Aquinas, as I recall, in that calendar of saints. And last, he told us of the lives of the many martyrs who have been canonized as saints. Saint Stephen was stoned to death. Justin, martyr at Rome, was beheaded. The sermon emphasized that the chances were that the confirmands sitting before him would never be called upon to risk everything they had, even their lives, for the sake of Christ. But there are other risks that they might take. My mind went to the possibilities with which they might be confronted. They might be called upon to risk being called names or being ostracized because they defended a classmate who was being bullied. What could be worse for a teenager than to be shunned? Those who might choose a military career stood a chance of facing some risk. And what about us, the adults? Always playing it safe, never taking that extra step of speaking up for someone. In some companies, complaining about the boss means losing one's job. Whistleblowers know they might be risking their lives. Believing in a cause is easy, maybe even sending a donation at Christmas to support it. But joining a picket line or a march on Washington requires considerable risk. Or at the very least, we may risk only discomfort, such as standing in the snow with signs opposing the death penalty, or supporting undocumented immigrants. The bishop went on to say that there are plenty of dates in the prayer book which have not been assigned to a saint. I acknowledge to myself that we in the congregation are alive and thus have time to risk, even if in some small measure. We have a lifetime of opportunities to make things right somewhere. There will be many moments of decision yet to come. Moral choices. Will I work with the poor, the marginalized for less money? Or will I choose to be a wealthy professional with little other purpose in life? A priest I heard about asked the question, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? That got me thinking. I might really play the lottery, bet big because I would win big, or perhaps write the great American novel because I knew it would sell 1 million copies. Not only would there be no risk in that, but there would be no motive, no excitement. The truth is, most of us dream the dreams, but never get past that. Why? Because failure is all too real, and the risk is something not worth taking. We hesitate to risk because of one thing, fear. Fear is a natural, healthy reaction to keep us safe. But too much fear can be paralyzing. Today's parable speaks of risk and reward and responsibility. Is there a balance there? A choice? God has given us the freedom of choice. It may sometimes involve risk, reward, and responsibility. I suspect that we've all made choices that we're not proud of. We're human. At some point in the past, we might have felt uneasy hearing a conversation that speaks unkindly of someone, even if it was someone we're not particularly fond of. Still, something inside us said, it's not right. Did we risk saying something, or were we afraid? Fear is a big motivator to keep quiet. I keep coming back in my mind to that once popular saying, what would Jesus do? Indeed, what would he do? For me, the takeaway from this parable might be that there is a time to be cautious and a time to risk. We were given a conscience, and we have the opportunity to seek God in prayer, to ask for guidance. If we make our decisions in faith and love, we may be assured that we have done our best. As soldiers of Christ, we will win some battles, and some we will lose. As ministers in the church, which we all are, we can help in whatever way God calls us. Slain by a fierce wild beast? Not likely, but we can try to be saints in our own way. They lived not only in ages past, there were hundreds of thousands still. The world is bright with the joyous saints who love to do Jesus' will. You can meet them in school or in lanes or at sea, in church or in trains or in shops or at tea. For the saints of God are just folk like me, and I mean to be one too. Amen. Amen.